Thanks for staying with us right here on Sunrise as we continue this Friday morning. Well, you heard about that court ruling when it comes to spanking as a form of discipline being questioned and how parents shouldn't be doing that. And there's been a mini uproar with a lot of parents in saying, okay, what about my rights as a parent when it comes to disciplining my child? And of course, what is the best way to go about instilling discipline to your children in your household after all that? I'm sure you've had those conversations with your friends and you're looking at how you discipline your children as well in your house. So, well, that's what we're talking about this morning. Be part of our conversation by giving us a call when we get into that. Thanks for staying with us right here on Sunrise on a Friday where we're getting into our topical issue of the week. Spanking as a form of discipline has been under the microscope for several years. With corporal punishment being prohibited for 21 years in South African school system, spanking a child in the home environment was the next issue to be abolished. Now, the South Gauteng High Court last week ruled that it is illegal to spank your own child in South Africa. If you're a parent of little humans and watching this morning, you might want to come closer as we delve into this conversation. Now, we have in studio with us this morning, Jena White. She's from the Star Academy, and she is a certified behavioral analyst. And then, of course, so we're also joined by Jita Denan. She's from Childline. Now, on Skype or on the phone, we are also joined by Dr. Harry Swain from the Freedom of Religion of South Africa. Now, who is speaking against this law? Now, to be part of this conversation, we're taking your calls on 011-447-1742 or 011-447-1620. And you can also be part of our conversation by sharing your thoughts on our Facebook and Twitter pages. Good morning to you guys, and thanks very much for joining us this morning. So let me start off this conversation with you, Jita, from Childline. Obviously, when this court ruling came in, what was Childline's response?
We welcome the result. For many years, we've argued for positive discipline as opposed to punishment. And I think the stark contrast between the way adults are seen in the law and children are seen in the law, this addresses that. It wouldn't be legal for me to hit you. So to hit a small, vulnerable person who's unable to defend themselves, it seems completely illogical that they would be not protected in the same way by the law.
Well, all the parents went, well, how do you expect me to discipline this ill-disciplined little person?
Indeed. So, you know, we don't see it as a form of kind of policing and criminalizing and you know, wrecking families and that sort of thing. But what we want to do is to encourage parents to think about discipline differently, to think about the way they raise their children from the very beginning, using alternative forms of discipline. There's a huge difference between punishment and discipline. Discipline is internalized. It is about kind of preventative, knowing what's right and what's wrong, talking about why things are right or wrong. Punishment is reactive and it is punitive rather than actually using an opportunity to teach the child. So these are the kinds of conversations we would like to have with parents and for parents and children themselves to have in the home.
Well, there are... Unfortunately, you know, the parents themselves are not necessarily having these conversations, but when it comes to behavioral change and understanding how we can be able to distinguish between the difference, you know, punishment versus discipline. So maybe let's bring it in there, Jena, so you can be able to sort of like give us a sense from that point of view. Your reaction as a Star Academy to this ruling and how maybe what parents need to understand.
Well, Star Academy's point of view is that it's a good opportunity for us to communicate to parents that there are alternative ways to discipline children. You've got to be careful when you look at punishment procedures. There's research showing that what you run the risk of seeing modeling, so the child learns, well, if I get smacked, I can smack. There's modeling, there's aggressive and emotional responding that can come from physical discipline. There's also counter control, so it turns into a battle of wills between the parent and the child, and there is thousands and thousands of research articles demonstrating the efficacy of alternative discipline strategies. So the Star Academy agrees that physical discipline is not necessary, and there are many research-based effective alternatives to physical discipline.
All right, alternative forms of discipline when it comes, of course, to dealing with children. Let's take it further and bring in Dr. Mark OHara on the line from Freedom of Religion. So let's get your standpoint, because a lot of parents went and said, and they quoted that verse. Where does it goes? You spare the rod, you spoil the child, and a lot of them were hiding behind that. What is your position on this latest ruling?
Well, I think one of the things that we want to say perhaps up front is that 4SA does not support spanking per se, but we rather support the rights of parents to decide for themselves, according to their religious and moral convictions, what is in the best interest when it comes to disciplining their children. I think it's very important to also note that the law particularly has never condoned abuse, has never allowed assault, violence, and I hear the word punishment mentioned. You know, I think many parents would not consider, if they spank their children, to be punishing them. They would consider it to be a form of discipline, one of the things that they do in order to raise their children up to know the difference between right and wrong. And again, I think importantly, in the context of the home, which is, of course, or should be at the very least, a loving environment, that is where children can learn the difference between right and wrong. And if they don't learn it there, they're probably going to learn it without much love in society when they get out. So I think it's important that we take a very sort of circumspect view on this whole matter.
All right. So, Jita, in terms of you from Childline, what has been the biggest struggle with parents distinguishing between discipline and punishment? And why are these words used sort of like, intertwined?
I think socially sanctioned behavior, really. It's generational, and so you were beaten, you beat your children, and so it goes on. And we see that in all forms of violence, that it's cyclical in nature, and that each generation learns from the previous one. And the problem that we see is that in families, and this is research supported as well, in families and societies where any form of violence, mild or severe, is used as a form of discipline, you have the risk of escalation. When you beat your child, it is usually out of anger and frustration and feelings of disrespect and so on. It's a very emotional and reactive response. And in that situation, you are somewhat out of control very often. And so the risk of escalation is where does that line get drawn? Who's going to measure the sort of the pressure or the severity of that smack? Okay. And generally, physical abuse, also research proven, physical abuse is directly linked with so-called corporal punishment or discipline.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it at that for now. We're going to take an ad break, and then we come back with this conversation right here on Sunrise. And, of course, would like you to be part of that. And also still to come is your news in Afrikaans. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Sunrise as we continue this morning with our conversation on the new law on spanking with Jena White from the Star Academy, as well as Jita Dinan from Childline. And on Skype, we're also joined by Dr. OHara from the Freedom of Religion of South Africa. We're speaking against this law. Now, to be part of this conversation, you can be part of it, of course, by calling us on 011-447-1742 or 1620. Okay, so let me start with you, Dr. Michael, and ask, when you discipline children, we're trying obviously to establish a healthy psychological boundaries and teach them acceptable behaviors. How do we go about doing that if we not obviously, how do we do that if we're going to spank them, especially in a country where violence is at the level that it's at?
I think it's important to say that spanking at the moment is actually really quite academic, because it is now illegal to spank your child. It is a criminal offense. And again, I think one of the problems that 4SA has with that, because we obviously look at things from a legal perspective, is that essentially what you are doing is you're making potentially many well-meaning, very good parents potential criminals. And although there's been a sort of a sense of, well, don't worry, we're not going to really enforce it, the reality is that it will be enforced. And when it is enforced, if you are convicted or even investigated, that is a highly disruptive thing. And if you're convicted as a criminal, then you have a criminal record. You could well lose your job. You will obviously be disadvantaged in many other areas if you apply for visas, for example. And this has been the case in other countries where the same law has been passed or the same defense has been removed. It has been very, very disruptive to parenting. Generally speaking, and the positives which are perhaps hoped for and anticipated, the reality is that they have not materialized. Certainly not in a country like New Zealand, which has had this now going on for 10 years.
Okay, all right. So let me ask you that, Jena, in terms of like, how can parents then be able to enforce discipline and correct behavior of some sort to children? What are they to do in what Dr. Michael is arguing?
Sure. Well, at the Star Academy, there's always two components to the program, and one is the skill acquisition and one is the behavior management. So the first thing to do when you've got a child who's misbehaving, the first thing you need to do is determine whether it is deliberate and purposeful misbehavior, or whether it's because they don't know better. If it's because they don't know better, then you've got skills that you need to teach, whether that's emotional self-control skills.
We're talking to a lot of parents who say, I'm not even skilled to think of it like that.
Sure.
I just know that this child is out of order and they're misbehaving right now, and I need to put the situation under control.
The most simplistic tool that I have, and I've got a big toolbox, and that's what I want parents to know about, though, is that so that they know that there are lots of alternatives. You try one, it doesn't work, fine, we've got another one for you. But the most simple tool I can give parents is to figure out why the child is engaging in that misbehavior, and to not let that misbehavior achieve its purpose, and to teach the child an alternative, an appropriate alternative behavior that is going to achieve that purpose. So let me give you an example. If the child is, and again it's very simplistic, but if the child is tantruming in the shops because they want a sweet, don't give the child a sweet when they're tantruming, because that would teach them tantruming gets me a sweet.
Okay, sweets. A lot of parents are going, that's very cute. He's on the family laptop, he's watching porn. Can we get to the real issues?
Yes, fine. Okay, so one of the interventions that we have is rules. The other thing you need is a contingency of behavior. So you need, this is the rule, you may look at this. Also, a mistake parents make is to just don't do this, don't do that, don't. So what does the child, how does the child know what they should do? So state a rule for the child. You may use your computer for this, this, and this. And if you stick to using your computer for this, this, and this is the consequence you'll receive. This is the reward, or whatever you want to put in place. And if you don't, then you won't get that reward. And if you find the right reward, the right consequence, I promise you it will be effective.
Well, we're taking your calls as well for you to speak for yourselves as parents on 011-447-1742, 011-447-1620. Because truthfully, Gita, a lot of parents are feeling like so much has been taken away from them already. You know, look at this. They're arguing, for example, look at what's happening in our schools. We knew that teachers could discipline our children in schools. Now the schools are totally chaotic, and it's because there is no punishment for these children in school. They're not being disciplined. The teachers are saying they're ill-disciplined. We can't do anything. These children have rights. Now it's coming into homes. That's how parents are looking at the situation.
If I may just say that actually, while corporal punishment has been banned in schools, it is rife. It is used in most of the schools that we go into every year. So corporal punishment is banned. While it is banned, it has by no means stopped. It is used on children every day, both at home and in school. So for us to say that the lack of corporal punishment is causing chaos is meaningless, because there isn't a lack of corporal punishment. There's an abundance of corporal punishment. So just that's kind of just to start there. But really, I think that we're in a country where rights have always been an issue. And the interesting thing for me is always that we have this perception that if we have denied people rights and then we give them rights, that somehow ours have been reduced. And this is a fallacy, right? It's not a limited basket.
But have we empowered them to know how to act responsibly with those rights that they've been given? Or we just give them rights without empowering them to be able to manage those rights?
Well, this is a responsibility of all adults in children's lives, is to look at our responsibilities and to look at our rights in conjunction with that. We have rights, but we also have a responsibility to others, the reciprocity of human rights. And that is something that we should be talking about every day, that we should be modeling. But just as an example, if I have the right to have my body protected and kept integrous, why does a child not have the same right? We say children have all these rights, and I want to ask, if you have the right to education, health, life and dignity, which one would you like to take away?
All right, of course, we're taking your calls this morning. Let me bring in Dr. Mark OHara for that. Your response to what the ladies have said this morning, Dr. Michael?
I think one of the things one has to do is to also look at the reality in the country that we live in. You know, we've heard statistics that 30 million people live on less than 1,000 rand a month.
Yes.
If the houses that they live in, we would see, if we're a privileged class, so to speak, as you know, very small privileges non-existent. So, you know, you can't simply send a child to like the naughty corner or reason with them if there's maybe sort of, you know, numbers of people living in the same dwelling. Privilege do you take away from somebody who has no privileges? So again, what we've done is we've actually taken away something which historically has been used as a last resort. And again, we are never ever going to condone violence and domestic abuse of that type of thing. That's unacceptable. But many parents feel now, I think, disempowered. And that's certainly the case, as I say, in other countries where this has been applied, New Zealand being a classic. It's 10 years into this very same thing. A third of children have actually threatened to report their parents to authorities for smacking them. You have a quarter of parents saying that they now feel less able to raise and bring up their children in an effective way than they did beforehand. So again, I think what we've had as well, just one final thing to say is, a judge has decided this. Normally this is a judicial process rather than just a single stroke of a pen from a judge. And I think we believe that it's very unfortunate that much of these social studies, which again paint a very different picture and say that there are actually some very positive benefits that children have experienced by being in a home where some measure of corporal punishment is given. This has all been ignored, and we haven't had, I think, the correct judicial process or legislative process, which is typically in Parliament. Parliament decided in 2005 that this defence would be valid and would remain, and it has now been removed by a judge. And we think that that is a very unfortunate way of actually bringing the law to pass.
All right, okay, let's take a caller on the line. I think we've got Brandon on the line. Is it Brandon? Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Brandon.
How are you?
Fine. Are you a parent?
Yes, I'm a parent.
Okay, your thoughts?
Sorry?
Your thoughts, your comment this morning.
After my comment this morning, ma'am, I just wanted to respond about the scripture you spoke about, that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. And then what it specifically means is that a shepherd in the old times used the rod to guide the sheep. And when the sheep will fall in the ditch, the shepherd will guide
okay,
the sheep.
so the scripture is out of context in this case. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, so what it actually means for parents is that parents should guide the children.
Okay, all right, we've lost him. Okay, let's take Tsepiso on the line from Porchester. Hi, Tsepiso. Tsepiso, good morning. Tsepiso, we can't have you and your TV on at the same time. Switch off your TV, please. Okay, go ahead.
Morning, how are you?
We're good, thanks. Okay, we still have the same problem there. Okay, so let me ask you in this case, Jena, in terms of like then, how do we equip parents to be able to understand how this law will apply and not feel as frustrated as Dr. Michael has said, and be able to still instill discipline to their children?
I agree with what he said about parents feeling disempowered. If parents do feel disempowered, I think that's the message that both of us are trying to get across, is that there's no need to feel disempowered because of this law. There are alternatives. There are other things that you can do, and in fact, they are some of the most research-based alternatives. I mean, these are things that we're telling you are much better for disciplining your child.
Okay, but and I'm going to play, I don't like this word, devil's advocate. A lot of parents are not in the position to even have access to that information. And then they're saying, based on their environments and where they find themselves, unfortunately, they're dealing with children who should understand the challenges that they're facing in their families that they're talking about. They could be having socioeconomic problems where they say, I have enough problems to even be dealing with you. I'm a domestic worker. I'm not there. You're taking drugs. I don't need that. I'm going to beat this out of you. And it sounds harsh, but that's the frustration that a lot of parents are feeling. That I'm not even equipped to. Why are you even taking drugs? Why are you even doing this when you know the challenges that we face? So they're obviously using their problems to deal with a situation that even has nothing to do with those children. So the level of frustration is too heightened already for them to be thinking, research, this is the best behavioral pattern, and this is what I must do.
Can I just say, you know, as Childline, a lot of people perceive us to be there for children to phone, which of course we are. However, we are there for parents to phone as well, for support. It's a toll-free number. It's available 24/7, 365. And if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling stuck and not sure what to do in a particular situation with your child, phone. We also offer free parenting workshops at schools, at our offices all around the Gauteng province. So we are there to support parents. Our mandate, our mission is to strengthen and protect families, actually. And so I think that while I get what you're saying, that not everyone's going to sit on Google and read thousands of scholarly articles, there are support systems in place for parents. We're a phone call away.
Okay. What is the number?
It is 08000 55 555.
Okay. Let me just get Dr. Michael, your final thoughts as we wrap up, Doctor?
I think, again, the unfortunate thing now is that any form of physical discipline, even a slap on the wrist potentially, has now become a crime. And interestingly enough, if somebody were to phone Childline and confess that they had actually smacked their child, Childline is actually under a duty to report them to the police and to have that investigated. So, you know, what we've done is we've suddenly changed gears drastically without really much, I think, preparation in advance or thinking through the consequences. And again, for that to be done in a law court through a high court judge, rather than through a more lengthy and perhaps more deliberate process from the legislature, that we see as a very unfortunate outcome of this case.
Okay. Well, your final thoughts there, Jena?
Just, I would encourage parents to follow Gita's advice and get the help and resources that they need. If they do have access to an organisation like the Star Academy as well, we also offer parent training, and there is not one solution. If we will give you a behaviour intervention plan, if it doesn't work, and it's got to be something that works for your family. So, you know, help is out there.
All right, great stuff, guys. Thanks very much for being part of our conversation this morning. We've been speaking to Jena White from the Star Academy, as well as Lynn, I beg your pardon, with Lynn Coward, rather, from Childline this morning, as well as Dr. Michael on Skype. Do stay with us for more information. As you've heard, you can call Childline on 08000. It's 08000 rather 55555. So it's 08000 55 555. So that's the number where you can get more information. Do stay with us. It is Sunrise Live right here on E!